Picture this. It's a late night not unlike any other. You're home alone sitting at your desk getting some work done. The room is silent barring the faint hum of the computer in front of you, and dark aside from the warm light of a nearby lamp. Outside, the wind rustles through the trees. It's dark, only illuminated by a streetlight in the distance, and as your attention starts to wander, you think that you can almost make out a shape staring back at you from the tree line. You're not sure if it's the branches moving in the wind or something else, but when you get up to examine it further, it's gone. That's when you start to notice more things. The shadows in the corners of the room feel just a little more sinister, and faint noises can be heard coming from what sounds like the inside of the house. Nothing around you has changed, yet the comforting atmosphere that you initially had has now become unsettling, and you can't shake the feeling that something is in here with you. Way too often, in my opinion, horror media relies heavily on cheap jump scares or shocking visuals to unnerve the player. Much more effective in my opinion, and what I find lingers in my head longer, is building a spooky atmosphere that leaves the viewer wondering if that noise that they heard, or that thing that they saw out of the corner of their eye, was an easily explainable mundane part of everyday life, or something more sinister. In terms of horror games, these kinds of slow burn horror ideas instill a sense of dread and paranoia in the player, and that really does wonders for the immersion and ambience of a game. With the Halloween season quickly approaching, and horror being one of my favorite things to talk about on the channel, I figured it would be a great time to talk about one of the most unique horror games that I've ever played. To say that this game has a truly unique tone and atmosphere when playing it would be doing it a great disservice, because it is much more than that. If you've been following the channel for a while, you might know that cosmic horror is some of my favorite things to talk about, as I've done an entire video on it, and one of my other favorite things in horror that I never shut up about and you might have picked up on in that cold open is subtlety. I love when horror media takes a less is more approach to scaring the player. So when I found out about a small indie game that, while still in pre-alpha, wonderfully combines these ideas, all garnished with tons of world building and secrets, I knew that I had to cover it for the Halloween season. Note here that the game is still very early in development, so inevitably some things are going to be different by the time the game's actually released. However, I think most of my thoughts should still apply. With that incredibly long intro out of the way, there's a ton to unpack with this game, so let's get into the video. Turn off the lights, get comfy, and let's talk about the cosmic horror masterpiece that is Voices of the Void. In Voices of the Void, you play as the disheveled, sleep-deprived twink, Dr. Kellen, or Kel for short, who reminds me of this meme which isn't relevant to the plot, but I think it's a silly coincidence. Kel is a researcher under the most loose definition of employment possible of the ASO, or Alpine Signal Observatorium, which is a non-profit organization which pursues scientific research by any means necessary, including and not limited to observing and recording data of celestial bodies, and possibly feeding several researchers to the horrors of the forest. You know, for science. Most of the lore that Mr. Doctor knows, wonderful name by the way, and the rest of the dev team have in the game so far is kind of in the background, either told through the environment or found scattered throughout notes or emails. It's there and it's very interesting, but you kinda gotta work for it and piece it together yourself. But that's okay, because I personally love that kind of stuff. The game is very unique in the landscape of horror games as it doesn't try to scare the player outright in the traditional way. More so, it relies on lulling the player into a sense of comfort in mundane life stuff, while subtly throwing mildly unsettling things at them and finally pulling the rug out from under the player's expectation with some really well done scares. This results in one of the most effective feelings of persistent dread and paranoia that I've ever encountered in a game. The game masterfully contrasts the mundane with the paranormal, and it makes for one of the most unique feeling games I've ever played. In my experience, truly effective horror media shouldn't try to be scary all the time. You need to give the viewer a chance to breathe and lower their guard, otherwise you eventually become desensitized to the jump scares, and in turn making what would be an otherwise good scare into something lackluster. This is where Voices of the Void shines, but to really get a sense of that, we have to talk about the gameplay itself. Moving on to the actual game now. Starting up the story mode after the tutorial, which I'll come back to later, Cal arrives at the Dunkeltaler Forest National Park in the remote Swiss Alps. This is the primary setting of the game and where you'll be living and working for the foreseeable future. You arrive at the gates around midnight with nothing but a luggage bag containing some essentials and set out through the spooky dark forest for the observatory, which is located smack dab in the middle of the park. Now, Dunkeltaler Forest maybe is the most cursed plot of land in existence, as it's publicly known as the focal point for many extraterrestrial and paranormal happenings. It's got an extensive history of missing persons, cryptic sightings in the forest, and unidentified flying objects. The ASO seems to be keenly aware of these events going on here, and thus only sends in a single operator to man the facility, in the aptly named Operation Canary, named after the use of canaries in mining operations, which you can assume doesn't bode well for our protagonist.
I'm in danger!
We make our way to the observatory and head inside. We find the facility in a bit of a sorry state, as it has enough trash to put Osmongold to shame, and very clear signs that the last person stationed here either left in a hurry or was taken by something. Lore notes found elsewhere on the grounds favor the latter. The The observatory itself is an isolated concrete bomb shelter of a building that makes Soviet Russia look tame in its architectural design. It has all the markings of somewhere that many people would have lived and worked at one point, but by the time we get here the facility has been long abandoned, aside from the absolutely ridiculous number of vaguely unsettling humanoid mannequins littering every room of the building. Why they needed so many of these I still have no idea, maybe they were really into modeling outfits or something. The first few days here are fairly uneventful and consist mostly of familiarizing yourself with the layout of the building. Upstairs is your room where you'll be staying, complete with a bathroom that only has a cold knob for the shower, a cute balcony area to observe the otherworldly horrors, a kitchen with all the basic necessities for keeping yourself alive, and a bed that sounds like it gives a gravel driveway a run for its money in terms of comfort. All in all, not the worst place I've lived. Remember this mental image for later. Downstairs has a storage room for storage, a break room for taking a break, and a garage which holds what will become your trusty chariot or a screaming metal death trap depending on how you drive and whether or not you believe that gravity is a myth. Seriously, I think most of my deaths have been from hitting some terrain and launching myself into a tree or off a cliff, but I digress. The ATV is touchy and handles like it was designed by a schizophrenia patient, but it is nonetheless a suitable vessel for God's drunkest driver. There's a basement that's the stuff of nightmare fuel, containing an incinerator, the breaker box, and a mysterious freezer full of cow corpses. I don't think the chair holding the door closed is really doing much in terms of functionality, but it certainly adds to the aura. Last but not least for the downstairs is the computer room, which contains a desktop computer which would have been outdated for elementary schools in the 90s, but with maybe the most catchy startup noise known to man. Windows 98 has nothing on this. The room contains a sonar which shows where entities are on the map, as well as the signal processing workstation, which is where you'll be doing most of your job. So, what is your job exactly? Your job is to listen to anomalous space noise, then record varying quantities of those onto hard drives, process them to a specified quality level, and then finally send them off to your employers via drone each day. This is the primary gameplay loop of the game. Each day you'll get an email with a list of satellites to gather data from and a number of how many signals you'll need to process and what quality from 1 to 3 that they'll need to be. You start by pinging the celestial bodies and waiting for the satellite array to move to its direction, which will then start downloading the noises and an image of the object, which can be saved onto hard drives. In order to download them effectively, you'll have to tune to the right frequency, otherwise it'll be even slower than normal. You then move the hard drives to the processing part of the computer and denoise them so that rather than being static, it might be static with a few beeps and boops in there. Sometimes it's something more unsettling. These hard drives are then sent out in a box along with a piece of paper containing the info from a few of the various satellites scattered throughout the grounds. In addition to the signal processing, your other duties include maintaining both the satellite servers and transformers, both of which break down immediately after fixing another one. A Sisyphean task in the truest sense of the phrase. Fixing the satellite servers, or the processing servers, is done by doing a math minigame which gives me flashbacks to math class, which might be the scariest part of the game. Failing to achieve your quota each day will result in a passive-aggressive email in typical corporate fashion by Dr. Bao and less pay at the end of each day. You're paid in a currency called points, which is only accepted by the ASO store, meaning it's about as good as Monopoly money. However, it can be redeemed for a variety of things from basic necessities to upgrades to your workstation, and even things to decorate your space with, which I think is one of the best parts of the game, but more on that later. If all of this sounds a bit daunting, it's because it is when starting out. With how incredibly slow the equipment works early on, reaching even the basic quota for the signals can be challenging. Seriously, this download speed's only rivaled by actual dial-up internet or watching the grass grow. But as you get better at doing it, and you start to streamline the process and get upgrades to your workstation, it becomes very methodical and satisfying. This is the key to Voices of the Void's horror. It is just so good at lulling the player into a sense of comfort that when the scares do happen, they are particularly effective. The day-to-day job simulator style of signal processing becomes a mundane part of each day, and at least for me, became strangely comfortable. I found myself setting a routine and splitting up the day between doing my job, cleaning up the station, and squeezing time in to explore the surrounding forest and structures, all before eating and going to sleep. The routine day-to-day activities really help ground you when things start to get weird. So the first week of the game is generally fairly tame. The game works on an event system which includes scripted story events which happen on specific days, as well as ones triggered by certain actions, and random ones which just have a percentage to happen each in-game day. I won't go over all of them here, and I think you should absolutely go in blind for best results, but I will spoil some of the story-related ones here, so there's your spoiler warning. One of the earlier ones that illustrates the kind of horror this game goes for happens around the 4th night, where around midnight the power will go off to the whole facility. In the file I started fresh to do this video, it happened in the middle of me preparing some signals for the following day, which I thought was very fitting. Even if you've checked up on the transformers, everything will suddenly go dark, and you'll be left wondering what kind of otherworldly force caused it. Well, as it turns out, it was just a breaker being tripped in the basement, a totally normal mundane thing, this time. This is where the game's overall vibes really shine. Most of the game is intentionally quiet both in terms of sound and atmosphere. Maybe you'll hear a bump coming from the vents, or the lights will flick off, but for the most part early on, you're completely alone in the eerie silence of the base, communicating with the outside world only through emails and drone package drops. Isolation heightens the paranoia of this game, so when the spooky things finally do happen, such as you waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to sleep because something is there, it makes that feeling of fear hit all the harder. Another one early on involves the mannequins from earlier. Eventually, they'll disappear, leaving only their stands. Sometime later, they'll return following you around when you aren't looking. Even if you've destroyed them all, one will always come back to follow you around menacingly. They don't attack you, they just follow you around, and if they catch up, they'll stand behind you and make you uncomfortable. Speaking of being stalked, you should totally microwave the deer skull found in the spooky abandoned cabin in the woods. Surely nothing bad could happen. Even sleep isn't safe. Periodically, when you sleep at lower stamina, you'll have these dream sequences where you have some kind of goal to reach or task to do. Failing to do so will result in you violently waking up with less stamina than what you went to bed with. The physics and controls here are wonky and the visuals are, well, dreamlike and surreal. It's why I no longer take Benadryl, because then I have to fight the Hat Man and I owe him money. If you decide not to sleep, you're stalked by the Insomniac, which is this tall, lanky humanoid figure who stares at you until you're forced to sleep. About a week in, you'll get a signal that sounds like gargled speech and an image depicting a triangle object in the sky. One that you've definitely seen before. After that, satellites Romeo and Sierra will go down, and as you trek out there to fix them, you'll stumble upon those same triangles hovering just above the ground, which will go invisible if approached. Upon inspecting the area, you find a picnic set up. These are the Arrivals, an alien race of cat people, no I'm not joking, who have now become your neighbors. If you were sick of the quiet, eerie isolation of the base thus far, fear not, because these guys exist to keep you on your toes as an intergalactic griefing squad. Depending on how you interact with them, their pranks can range from aggressive paper mache to rigging your ATV to explode and even turning off the sun. Yes, this game has a reputation system which is pretty ingenious. Positive reputation with these guys doesn't mean they stop pranking you, however it does cause them to leave you brownies and other nice things amongst the griefing. Eventually, you find out that these aren't the only aliens in the galaxy, because while you've been staring into the abyss, it's been staring back at you. The other species of aliens are aware of your presence and will regard you with either complete indifference or open hostility. In true cosmic horror fashion, you're powerless to stop these beings from doing whatever it is that they're doing here. The only control you're able to exhibit on your surroundings is through your signal gathering each day. The horrors persist, yet so do you, and capitalism stops for no one, so bring me 3 signals of level 3 and don't get disemboweled by floating pig monsters. The ending of the current story content culminates in what I can only describe as all-out alien war, which you can only sit on the sidelines and watch while trying not to die. With how quiet this game is in general, having something as grandiose as this as an ending is really fitting and makes for fantastic contrast to the subtle horror early on. There's so many more cool events that I'd be here for weeks just talking about them, and I have other things I want to touch on in this essay, so I have to move on. Seriously, the game has so much to unpack and so much content to discover. If you're on the fence, it's free and you should go play it. Amongst the alien turf war, being stalked by all manner of horrifying entities, and the never-ending march of capitalism, you might think this game is constant nightmare fuel. And while it does do the horror parts very well, there's another half to the game which I think it does equally as well and is worth mentioning. The game is at times incredibly beautiful and cozy. The game has this gorgeous lighting and visual quality to the environment, and it really makes the base and the surrounding area feel lively and intriguing. Like the sunrise and sunset cast this beautiful hue across the valley and the tree line, and in those quiet moments when I'm not being stalked by otherworldly horrors beyond my comprehension, I would almost forget that this is a horror game. It's just that well done. During the blackout I mentioned earlier, if you go outside, the game spawns more fireflies than usual, and the first time I saw it, I was stunned at how pretty it was. On the second night, you're treated to a meteor shower event, which I didn't actually notice on my first playthrough, but it's absolutely beautiful as well. I think in general they did a great job on the lighting and particle effects, as well as on the skybox and the movement of the stars and such. The same goes for the base itself. Remember at the beginning of the essay when I was talking about how it was an abandoned trash heap upon arrival? Well, over the course of my playthrough, I began cleaning it up in the background during my downtime or while I was waiting for a signal to download, which became a very comfy and satisfying activity amongst the weirdness. It transformed this creepy abandoned bunker into a homey sanctuary. Using my Monopoly money I earned, I outfitted the base with all manner of decor and made the once menacing base into a comfy vibe that I would be happy to live in. The way you interact with the props and the depth that the item system and decorating system have are one of my favorite parts of this game. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I actually grew to love the cleaning aspect of this game. Even the things that most would consider busy work became a fulfilling part of the day-to-day activities. I think it provides a perfect dichotomy when paired with the horror and something that more games should consider trying out. Voices of the Void seems to have this interesting philosophy when it comes to game design, where there's just layers and layers of stuff, and no matter how much I dig, there's always more hidden just underneath that. Remember earlier when I said I'd talk about the tutorial later? Well, that's the perfect example of this. You have to complete the tutorial before starting the main game or any of the optional modes, and upon first glance it's much like any other, familiarizing you with the controls and the game mechanics. However, if you decide to stray off the main path, or maybe the keen-eyed among you might have noticed some unusual items just out of sight, you'll find that even the tutorial has a lot going on. Rooms upon rooms of liminal space goodness with creepy lore notes that are assumedly talking to the player themselves, which is wild. The main game has this too. There's a convoluted side activity that includes a lot of steps that you can do to find an SCP, and one in the same vein that opens a portal to hell. They didn't have to go this hard to hide content and keep finding ways to subvert player expectations, but they did. It just gives this feeling of wonder and makes you want to keep an eye out for anything else unusual, so you can keep finding new hidden stuff where you'd least expect it. Voices of the Void is a really special experience. It's not often that I find myself at a loss of words when it comes to describing how a game feels to play, but this is one of those rare instances, and I genuinely hope I've been able to describe just how interesting and cool this game is. The game feels like it's pulling in a million different directions, but in the best possible way. It's spooky and has an unmatched sense of paranoia and dread at all times, but conversely it's also one of the most cozy and atmospheric games I've ever played. It has layers and layers of hidden content and random events that exist to subvert the player's expectations and keep them on their toes, always looking out for something unexpected around the corner. It's a great spooky light game to play during the Halloween season, or if you just love atmospheric horror and are looking for something different. I don't think my brief description of it here has done it justice, so I highly recommend you play it for yourself and then come back here and discuss it in the comments. I for one can't wait to see the full release whenever it's done. I've been Meaty, thank you for watching my video, roll the outro. Hey there, if you made it until now, I just wanted to say thank you, it really means the most. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you enjoyed it and you haven't yet done so, as it helps me out and I'd appreciate it a ton. Comments are also appreciated. What did you think of the video? Have you tried Voices of the Void? If so, what did you think? I love continuing discussions of things I didn't cover in the video in the comments. If you want to see more of my content, I'll have playlists in the end cards, as well as linked in the description right above my socials if you want to follow me on any of that. Twitter, Discord, etc. If you're in the mood for more spooky stuff, I've got a playlist of other spooky videos, including my Halloween videos from previous years and other horror-related content I've done, as well as other unrelated things like video essays and game reviews. If you really like my content, you want to support me in what I do here, there's a Patreon link too where you can get your name in the credits, as well as early access to my videos and periodic input on video ideas, but no pressure, I'm just happy you watched this video. Speaking of patrons, a huge thank you to NDH for your support. You help me continue to make these silly videos, and I appreciate that a lot. Thank you all once again for watching, have a good one, and I'll see you next time.